welcome to another world after coronavirus. I'm really happy and honored for this special episode because there is a special guest joining us today. And that special guest is not only mine, but a hero of many generations. Both of us are unfortunately in self-isolation, so this is also a very special occasion. But without further introduction, I think most of you who are watching this know who is Noam Chomsky. And I'm so glad that Noam is joining us today. Hello, Noam. Could you just tell us where are you? Are you already in self-isolation and for how long?
Well, I'm in Tucson, Arizona, in self-isolation for the time.
So you were born in 1928. And you wrote your first essay, as far as I know, when you were only 10 years old, which was an essay on the Spanish Civil War, actually just after the fall of Barcelona. So that was 1938, which looks very far away for my generation. You survived the Second World War, Hiroshima. I mean, you were a witness to Hiroshima. You were a witness to many very big, important political, historic events, from the Vietnam War to the oil crisis, to the fall of the Berlin Wall. Before that, you were a witness to Chernobyl. After that, in the 90s, you were a witness to a historical moment which was leading to 9/11, which was also a global event. And most recently, I mean, I'm trying to really shorten a long history and a lifetime of someone like you. But the most recent event was the financial crash of 2007 and 2008. So in this background of such a rich life and being a witness and also an actor in these major historical processes, how do you look at the current coronavirus crisis? Is it an unprecedented historical event? Is it something which surprised you? And how do you look at it? That would be my question.
Well, I should say that my earliest memories, which are haunting me now, are from the 1930s. The article that you mentioned on the fall of Barcelona was actually mainly about the apparently inexorable spread of the fascist plague all over Europe and where it was going to end. I much later discovered when internal documents came out that the analysts of the US government at the time and in the following years expected that the war would end they knew a war was coming, that a war would end with the world divided into a US-dominated region and a German-dominated region. So my childhood fears were not entirely out of place. And those memories come back now. I can recall when I was a young child, listening to Hitler's Nuremberg rallies over the radio. I couldn't understand the words, but you could easily understand the moods and the threat and so on. And I have to say, when I listen to Donald Trump's rallies today, it resonates. It's not that he's a fascist. He doesn't have that much of an ideology. He's a sociopath, but an individual concerned with himself. But the mood and the fear is similar. And the idea that the fate of the country and the world is in the hands of a sociopathic buffoon is shocking. The coronavirus is serious enough, but it's worth recalling that there's a much greater horror approaching. We are racing to the edge of disaster, far worse than anything that's happened in human history. And Donald Trump and his minions are in the lead in racing to the abyss. In fact, there are two immense threats that we're facing. One is the growing threat of nuclear war, which has exacerbated by tearing what's left of the arms control regime. And the other, of course, is the growing threat of global warming. Both threats can be dealt with, but there isn't a lot of time. And the coronavirus is a horrible plague, can have terrifying consequences, but there will be recovery. The others, there won't be recovery. It's finished. If we don't deal with them, we're done. And so the childhood memories are coming back to haunt me, but different dimension. Threat of nuclear war, we can get a sense of where the world really is by looking to this January. As I'm sure you know, every year the doomsday clock is set with the minute hand a certain distance from midnight, which means termination. Ever since Trump was elected, the minute hand has been moving closer and closer to midnight. Last year was 2 minutes to midnight, the highest, matching the highest it ever reached. This year, the analysts dispensed with minutes, started to move to seconds, 100 seconds to midnight. That's the closest it's ever been, citing three things: the threat of nuclear war, threat of global warming, and the deterioration of democracy, which doesn't quite belong until you think about it, but it does, because that's the one hope that we have for overcoming the crisis. An informed, involved public taking control of their fate. If that doesn't happen, we're doomed. If we're leaving our fate to sociopathic buffoons, we're finished. And that's coming close. Trump is the worst, but that's because of US power, which is overwhelming. People talk about US decline, but you just look at the world, you don't see that. When the US imposes sanctions, murderous, devastating sanctions, it's the only country that can do that. Everyone has to follow. Europe may not like, in fact, hate sanctions on Iran, but they have to follow. They have to follow the master, or else they're kicked out of the international financial system. Now, that's not a law of nature. It's a decision in Europe to be subordinate to the master in Washington. Other countries don't even have the choice. And back to the coronavirus, one of the most shocking, harsh aspects of it is the use of sanctions to maximize the pain, perfectly consciously. Iran has its own enormous internal problems, but by the stranglehold of tightening sanctions, which are consciously designed openly to make the suffer and suffer bitterly now. And Cuba has been suffering from it from the moment that it gained independence, but it's astonishing that they've survived, but they stay resilient. And one of the most ironic elements of today's coronavirus crisis is that Cuba is helping Europe. I mean, this is so shocking that you don't know how to describe it. That Germany can't help Greece, but Cuba can help European countries. If you stop to think about what that means of all our civil words fail, just as when you see thousands of people dying in the Mediterranean, fleeing from countries that Europe has devastated for centuries and being sent to the deaths in the Mediterranean. you don't know what words to use. The crisis, the civilizational crisis of the West at this point is devastating to think about. And it does bring up childhood memories of listening to Hitler raving on the radio to raucous crowds adoring him at the Nuremberg rallies. You begin to wonder, is this species even viable?